I think it's very much of a trust issue with many political topics nowadays. Weirdly, it's like people don't trust the governments anymore. Like a few decades ago, people were more like, I think they'll be all right. They won't take advantage of it. It will work out. They wouldn't be like this evil. And nowadays, somehow the sentiment is more like, oh man, the moment they can, they will. So it's interesting to see how that changed. And I want to ask you something about that, because I recently talked to a German economist and analyst and so on. And he was like, yeah, the ECB and the Fed, they're idiots. And I was like, well, do you think they're incompetent? Or do you think they're lying? That they're outright lying, saying, like, inflation is transitory, even though so many people, so many advisors, so many consultants, all on YouTube and worldwide said, it's clear that that's not transitory. And still they push that story. And I asked him if it they just say that to not cause a mass panic, even though they know, like, come on, all the guys who know about it know how to move first so they can benefit from it, or if he genuinely believed that the ECB and the Feds were that incompetent. And his opinion was they are really that incompetent. He believes that they really don't understand the market, that they're living in an ivory tower, not understanding any of the stuff they're talking about. I would like to know your opinion. Is it more that they're incompetent, or do you think, well, man, they're saying something and know that that's not the truth of what they say, and they've got another plan in the back of their mind? What's your take on that?
I have two opinions. My first opinion is that that the only thing that matters is not intentions, but results. And so whether they are incompetent or whether they are malevolent, their actions are producing specific results. And that I guess from the average person's perspective, like the results are the same either way. Now, I do think that there is a lot more evidence that it's incompetence rather than malevolence, because when you look at the big things that most large governments try to do, they are extremely inefficient. I mean, even if you look at when the incentives are aligned properly, and you look at large for-profit organizations that try and do things, organizations are extremely inefficient at doing things the larger they get. And the worse the incentives are aligned, the worse the outcomes tend to be. And so many times you actually get the opposite outcome. For instance, like the big push in the United States for funding for awareness and healthy habits in the United States. The result of that was over the next 20 years, the obesity rate just exploded, like doubled or tripled in the United States. And so,
really? Oh, man.
Yeah. And so it's just when you get the incentives wrong, and when you get a large enough, bureaucratic enough organization, the incompetence can actually produce opposite results. And then when you look at the people who have actually worked there, so there's this great book called Fed Up by Danielle DiMartino Booth, and she used to work at the Federal Reserve, and she discussed the kind of day-to-day life of the people who work there. Number one, they're all PhDs. They all come from the exact same schools that are all teaching the exact same school of economic thought. And none of them have ever had a real job in their life. Straight through academic, straight to the Federal Reserve, and that's where they spend their entire career. So they have no experience starting a business. They have no experience getting a job. They have no experience actually living through cycles and recessions and what it feels like to have prices go up and to lose your job and to be going for a promotion and to all of the stuff that normal people, citizens live through. They have no concept of this. So that's the first piece. Even during recessions, like on Wall Street, bonuses get cut, people get fired. Yes, during the good times, they live high on the hog, and during the bad times, they all get slaughtered. And that's just not true at places like the Federal Reserve. They all clock in and clock out at 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. and take their hour-long lunch, and they get their paychecks that are above what the industry would pay outside, and they go home and they have no idea what it's like to live in the real world. And then finally, that thing that I mentioned about like their school of thought, how they're all trained to think the exact same way, means that number one, they're using models that are wrong because they're just empirically proven to not work. And then number two, they're using data that is backwards looking. And so for the data to get through the real world all the way up to be accumulated and make its way to the Fed, and then for them to start to go through that data and try and run it through their models and accumulate it and watch trends, they're looking at stuff that's months or sometimes even years old. And so they're not looking ahead. They're not even looking at what's happening right now. They're looking at what's already happened in the rearview mirror. And so that is, I think, their training, the models they use, the data that they look at, and their lack of connection to the real world makes their actions produce the results that they do.
Man, that made me think of like playing a racing game with a lag of 5 seconds, where you see 5 seconds after you did something where your instructions are happening or what they are causing. But it's interesting to think. That's a good book that you suggested. I'll order that. That's really interesting, because of course all of these people are from the same circles. They learn the same things. They are not just they learn the same things. They are taught to interpret it in a specific way. Like, if this happens, then you have to think of it happening like that next. That's, man, I don't know, maybe it's just me. I always thought, and I still, like, in my core, I still think a bit like, nah, they know what they know about it. Like, they know, and they just, like, as for example, they don't want to cause a big bank run, so they say no, everything is safe, because they know it's not. If people had understood inflation is coming heavy, how many people would have stockpiled stuff when it was still cheap? So it's like, okay, it's gonna get worse if we say outright, oh yeah, inflation is gonna burn and get high and everything. So I'm not sure. I hope, I'm not sure if I hope that they're malevolent or incompetent. I don't know which word is better, honestly. But I think one of those solutions would be the CBDC. To get all of that done by those people in the Ivory Tower who are either incompetent or malevolent. One of those two, and they're supposed to get all of the control over all of the economy, and they won't be able to hold back. I've had an interview recently with a guy, liberal from a European think tank, a Hungarian guy, and we discussed an issue that politicians have too, like now in defense of the politician wants. It's, they have a job, and most people misunderstand the job of a politician. The job of a politician is to get elected. That's what their job is. That's what they get money for. That's, if they don't get that done, they're fired. That's the only thing that really matters for a politician, to get elected. And if, for example, in Austria now and in many European countries, I'm not sure how it was in America when the prices went up now. We have a big culture of demanding regulations and like price cuts and rationing and all of that. The people themselves demand it. For like the government has to step in, they have to make something, they have to do something, it can't get on and so on and so. No free market, it's not working, as we can see. We want the politicians to step in. Not stepping in as a politician in that climate would be political suicide. Let's be honest, it's impossible. So I don't know what is like the American take on that with the general population, but if there is a way for the politicians in that situation to take direct control, like through the CBDC, they will have to use it, because the people will even demand it, and they won't think through like the next step or 3 steps ahead. They will just think, okay, I've got an issue now, I want that issue solved, that's something that can solve it, do it, no matter the consequences. So if you like this clip, watch another one, and if you want to see the whole interview, click here.